Today in the show, we're talking about the best way to do some good in this world. Today's show is sponsored by the book For You, From Me by Raj Daniels. If you don't know Raj, make sure you check out his interviews on this show I did for episodes 1 and 2. The book, it's a daily dose of focus. This is not motivation by any means. That's fleeting. Raj's book is a perfect blend of the practical and the inspiring. A clear vision of how you should be approaching life, presented in a way that is simple to take action on. This is how I start my mornings, with a quick lesson from Raj's book. It shifts my mind and anchors in an often new perspective for my day. And that's so important, because it's not what happens to us throughout the day, but how we interpret what happens and how we choose to respond. Having more choices in how we craft those responses is incredibly powerful. So, head over to Amazon and grab your copy today. Real quick, before we get started, if you're here watching or listening, you've got some tie to this beautiful world of business of ours. Maybe you're an entrepreneur, consultant, or a sales or marketing pro looking to network and get in front of more prospects. Maybe you're building your personal brand from inside the corporation you work for. Or maybe you have a cause that you're passionate about and want to spread the word. Video can help with all of these. We hear that a lot, but it's a big leap from knowing you should be doing it and understanding how. From knowing what to say to making sure you remain credible in the process. Let me help you with this. I've been creating great content for people just like you for 26 years now. I'll help you figure out the type of videos you need and what to say in order to get your message across, and what you can do yourself and what you need help with. But getting your videos created is only half of it. How do you get them seen? I can help you optimize your videos to get found in search and develop a detailed strategy to get your videos in front of your target audience, helping sell to the prospect before they ever meet you. Head over to croft.media. From there, you can reach out to me for a free strategy session. I look forward to connecting with you. How's it going, everybody? Jason Croft here, the Credibility Craftsman, and I can't tell you how excited I am to bring you this guest, Kimberly O'Neil. I'm going to have a very short intro here because she speaks for herself. She's just fantastic, good friend of mine, and I think she's doing amazing things in this world. Her company, Cause Studio, is really an incubator for other nonprofits. She's such an expert in this space, and again, we'll dig into all that during the interview. But I just love the business mindset and principles that she brings to the nonprofits that she works with, just to help them operate better. And she runs everyone through this filter of, first, should you even be a nonprofit? And then what's the best way to go about that that's truly going to support your vision and your end goal the best long term? Just amazing what that takes and what she has going on. I'm so excited to bring this interview to you. So let's jump in with Kimberly O'Neil. Kimberly O'Neil.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here finally.
I know, right? She kept refusing to be on the show. No, that's not true.
It's so not true.
So I've had the good fortune of knowing Miss Kimberly O'Neil. It's like saying your whole name. It's very official and
I like that.
It's a good name.
That. My parents did good.
That's right.
I'll tell them. They did good.
I've had the good fortune of knowing her for a couple of years now. Past guest on Startup Dallas.
Yes.
Now on this wonderful show that I have.
I've been promoted.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Less cameras, not a studio. Maybe demoted.
But this is fancy.
Okay, at least
this setup, if you all haven't seen it, this setup is really fancy.
At least we're mobile.
Yes.
So that's good. Let's see some sights. Let's have a conversation. Let's catch up. And for the folks who don't know you, well, shame on them. But for them, give me a little history of, your journey to Dallas and background a little bit and what's led you to where we are. And then I want to dig into Cause Studio and so many of the things you have going.
So I'm a mentally retired senior government executive. That's my standing line. Spent about 20 years collectively around the country New York City, Washington, D.C., suburban city outside of Washington, D.C., working in municipal governments. And
Nice.
11 years ago, recruited to work for the city of Fort Worth, and that's how I got to Texas. And that's actually where I said I no longer wanted to work for government anymore. I just felt like after...
So Texas ruined it for you? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to say Texas ruined it. I just feel like at that point in my career, my dream job had already been done, and I had done it.
Which was?
City manager.
Okay. So that's that was your role in Fort Worth, right?
No, Fort Worth, I actually took a lower role. I was assistant director of the municipal court. I was tied to actually being the decision maker.
Gotcha.
And so I had achieved my dream job of city manager when I worked for the city of Glenarden, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. And so it's kind of like, you spend your time, you're told to go to college, get a job, whatever that dream is, go after it. And then when you hit that dream, it's like, okay, now what do you do? Right. So I mentally retired. And I figured all of the experience that I had would be better utilized on the outside of government, where I could be a lot more vocal, because everyone knows I'm an introvert with I'm an extrovert in terms of when I'm doing my work, but I just said I want to be able to speak and make a difference and not worry about whether or not I'm going to have a job at the end of the day. Right. So that's how I got to Texas. But I'm rooted in community. My parents got me active in government and politics when I was about 13 years old. So that's just an organic part of who I am. And so I spend my days now teaching about government for Collin College. I'm a full-time professor. So that's a new transition, going from part-time to full-time professor, which was my second dream job, but I thought I would be doing that around 60. So I'm ahead of the game. And then working with the nonprofit community, like that's a big part of who I am. And so that's pretty much how I spend my days around North Texas and serving other parts of the country too.
That's fantastic. And that's really where I know I'm familiar with is the Cause Studio side of things, which is my baby. Yes, and your nonprofit endeavor. Wow, it's hard to even put a label on it.
It's for those people that don't know. So I started out when I transitioned out of working for the government. I immediately went into my company, a consulting company, full time. And it was to work within the sports philanthropy realm. I used to work for Darryl Green, Pro Football Hall of Famer. I ran his foundation for a few years in Washington, D.C. And when I took another hiatus from government, and
just real quick, will you be offended if I edit out any mention of a Redskin of any kind?
Mr. Green? Well, I know what area I'm in.
I'm just asking the question.
I'm just going to say you can edit out the team, but not Mr. Green.
All right.
Because
I should have had her sign a release beforehand.
He's from Texas, born and bred in Houston, and he is... You gotta give it to him. Like, if you knew him outside of football, you'd understand. Right. You'd understand, but I know how everybody feels in this area.
Just thought I'd ask.
But anyway, so
that was the original, and you started out doing that. That was the original,
and Mr. Green just has this, I can't even put it in a word sometimes. He has this most genuine heart for serving. And, to work for him and to see how he operated and to know that he didn't accept less than what he thought the community should have. Wow. And so when you see athletes whose sports agents encourage them to start these foundations and these nonprofit endeavors, they typically don't go anywhere because they're being told to do it for a write-off versus the heart of the community. And I wouldn't say the majority of athletes are that way, but when you see the way that Mr. Green operated and then you see some other people, you see the disconnect.
Yeah. So how did that manifest itself? What were some examples of some of the things that he did?
So Mr. Green, when he started out, they had in Washington, D.C. just Darryl Green Days in the Park. And when you hear him tell his story, in the beginning, coming from Texas, he was used to kids going to parks and having things to do. Yeah. And so when he was drafted and started playing for the Redskins, I'm sorry. So when he started playing football, when he started playing football, he noticed that the kids in DC were just on the street. Wow. And he used to go down the street, grab kids, and take them to the park.
Oh, my goodness.
That organically transitioned into Darrell Green Days in the park. So it became just this signature event that was done in the community.
That's awesome.
That transitioned into a full-fledged nonprofit. And in the beginning, Mr. Green and his wife, they were going to kids' houses, doing their hair. They were paying for private school and private school tuition for these kids. And they were doing this out of their pockets, not raising funds to do it. They were just doing it. But as their family grew, of course, that becomes, more expensive and priorities change. And they formalized the Darrell Green Youth Life Foundation. And what that became was a faith-based organization that focused on character, education, and community building, not just for the child. So the signature was nurture the child, strengthen the family, rebuild the community. If we're really trying to impact children and we're not touching their family or the community, we're really not doing what we say we're doing. Oh, yeah. So we focused on that, and that organization replicated to have youth life learning centers around the country. And so when you look at someone that truly has dedicated their life to service and family and faith, you just begin to look at some other comparable people and just say, how can we help you do this better?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The bar is set really high.
Much higher.
But it's also great to have that to point to and say, this is what you could be a part of. Because part of it's that, like, even people with the best intentions just go, okay, great, but what do I do? Yeah. It has something to point to. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when I transitioned out working for the government, I started working specifically with athletes and trying to help them find their natural inclinations for giving. So, you see a bunch of guys or women working with kids, but maybe that's not their skill set. Maybe it's that they like working with animals, or maybe it's that they like working in environmental issues. But someone said, no, kids, that's the best PR move. So it was about finding the best match for organizations that could utilize someone's brand, time, and talent, but maybe it's an organization they don't know about. So my goal was to vet these organizations on behalf of the athletes and find organizations that would allow them to stay with them instead of just writing this one-time check or showing up just this one time.
Yeah, something they could rely on as again, not just a dollar amount, but as a true supporter to get them to other areas.
Right? Because we all have that thing when it comes to service or wanting to give back. I don't think there's a right or wrong place, but we all have that thing that works well for us. And sometimes people need help figuring out what that is so that they don't fall into this trap. And then they're not happy with serving and volunteering and donating their time or talent or their finances, whatever it is that they want to, whatever it is that they want to do. But what happened during that transition is nonprofits started coming to me and saying, yeah, but we want an athlete. Well, that's not how this works. Like, they're my client and then I vet you.
Right.
But what I realized is that organizations really needed help.
Not just with that aspect, but
just
overall.
Overall. Yeah. But then there was this one particular group of nonprofits that would come that not only did they need help, they might not need to be a nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what I call the startup nonprofits, borrowing the language from the traditional for-profit startup community. These newer organizations, the way I define them, organizations who haven't been around more than 5 years and or have never passed, that $100,000 mark when it comes to an operating budget, because that's really then a hobby that someone has tried to formalize because they can never just get it going. And so that's what Cause Studio ended up being. Cause Studio was born because there were these folks that had these amazing ideas. They worked full-time jobs. They couldn't afford the traditional nonprofit training that was offered in North Texas. And some of the training that's offered in North Texas wasn't catered to that particular group. It was catered to people that already had a certain type of structure in the organization. They already had a certain type of skill set, or they could get the on-the-job training.
Gotcha.
So Cause Studio was born to really just help to reduce the number of failing nonprofits in our area that needed to survive because they provide a tangible service.
So how does that manifest itself into basically sustaining itself? Because there's, in being, a living, breathing nonprofit yourself, or for-profit, or whatever combination thereof.
So for us, as it relates to Cost Studio, I intentionally keep it small. Mm-hmm. I intentionally keep it more grassroots. One of our goals is to make sure that we provide affordable training to the startup nonprofit community. We provide it free where we can. Mm-hmm. So that we rely on a lot of partnerships, a lot of sponsors. And we have, because of my background in the nonprofit sector, I have found ways to maximize the resources that we share. And so we're almost at the 4-year mark. We're at the 3.5-year mark now. What we're known for is our Incubator Program.
Right. Yeah. Dig into that, because it's incredible. Everything that these nonprofits actually go through is amazing.
So we have an Incubator Program, and we vet through an application process startup nonprofits that need help. Mm-hmm. We take them through a 3-year, very rigorous training program. We have just graduated our first cohort. So we've gone through the full 3-year cycle. And I always tell people, just because you're invited in doesn't mean you're going to make it. People fall off the spectrum because they realize this is just way too much work. This is not what I want to do. And
do they usually, is it usually like they just stop even their whole nonprofit endeavor, or just the cohort, or both?
No, some have. Some have stopped the nonprofit. Some do fall off because they realize it's just too much. Mm-hmm. Some, we actually had a retired professional athlete in the cohort, and he was really honest. He said the resources when he was in the NFL versus the resources when he retired were two totally different things. Oh, yeah. And he came to the realization, I just want to share my brand. I want to use what I created and just share who I am to help other causes. And so that was a win to us, right? Just getting through the incubator is not the win. The win is helping people to be responsible in the decisions that they've made for the nonprofit.
Right.
So we've had more successes than failures when I look at it from that spectrum. But out of the 7 organizations that started with us, only 1 made it the distance for the 3 years. It's a long time. And they, even with, I feel like they have a tremendous story to tell of just resilience.
What organization is that?
It's Bold Idea.
Okay.
Robin Brown and Ben Davis. I met them in the co-working community. And I actually have been with them since the day they launched. Officially launched, because they were in pilot before they became a nonprofit. But I was there the day they actually printed off their paperwork to send off to the IRS. And so when I look at them and the work that they've done, the highs and the lows, this is an example of an organization that deserves to be here. Awesome. And we're having a graduation for them in September. Officially, they finished in June, but they have since also a success. They were invited into the ground floor social innovation program by the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, which was a goal of mine as well, for organizations who wouldn't be able to compete for these types of programs and services in the area. How do we help them get prepared for competing for a space? So Robin and Ben proved that this does work when you dedicate the time.
Yeah. And so what are some of those things in preparation, both to go into that next level like that, but also just to operate better? And what are you kind of taking them through?
Commitment of time. This is not something that you can do. Like, I emphasize that this is like a part-time job, right? If you can't dedicate 40 hours a week to this endeavor, what are the days and what are the times that you are dedicating to this? Yep. We focus on 3 areas, which is capacity building. We split that into operations and fundraising, and then program. And we make sure that we provide, so they get curriculum-based training. So we meet once a month. The first year out of the 3 years. People have heard me talk about it before, infant, toddler, and kindergartner stage, right? Infants you do everything for. So that first year they're with us. We meet as a cohort monthly. They also do monthly one-on-one mentoring with me or another expert in the space. The end of the first year, every organization walks away with about 100 hours, 100 to 110 hours of structured curriculum-based and mentoring for each organization. The second year, you ask a toddler, you need help. They say no, but they really do because they still don't know what they're doing.
So
we keep an eye on them. So we scale back the amount of support that we provide to them. So instead of meeting monthly as a cohort, we meet every other month for a half a day. And then they still have the one-on-one mentoring. And then the last year is the kindergarten phase, right? I'm going to the big boy, big girl school. Don't take me to the door. Just drop me off because and so, but they forget their lunch, right? So you still have to go and rescue them. And so the third year, we kind of flip the reins. And instead of us being the driver of training and what's needed, they still have their mentoring, but we give them the batch of hours that they would typically get in years 1 and 2, and they tell us how they want to use them.
Perfect.
So, for example, with Bold Idea, we've done training with their board. We've just done maybe some strategic planning, mapping out of what's needed. So we use their mentoring time a lot differently, and then the training that's offered, we tend to look at where are the deficits. Now that we've gotten through the first 2 years, where are still some of the weak points that you might have, and let's figure out where those resources are and get them to you.
Awesome.
So that's the main thing that we're known for, but we do a lot of community-based training. So, we'll pick a series of topics, we'll offer it, and it's open to the public. You don't necessarily need to be a startup nonprofit, but the training is geared towards startup nonprofit professionals.
Right. That's awesome. So how are you getting kind of the word out about this even more and more, or is it right now it's like you're inundated? I mean, do you need people applying to that cohort? Are you in that mode still, or?
So we're working on a new program, which is a fellowship. So we look at the full spectrum of the nonprofit community. With our smaller nonprofits, our startup nonprofits, they often don't have the capital to hire people full time.
Right.
So we all, for the past year, we've really worked on a lot of research, and we've identified some additional areas in which we can help them. And one of them is creating a fellowship for them. And so it's twofold. We're trying to create a pipeline of talent for the nonprofit community, so we don't lose the talent here in North Texas, and they'll go someplace else, or they even go to a different sector and they really do want to be in the nonprofit community. So the fellowship is geared towards focusing on graduate students who have an interest in serving the nonprofit community, and we'll match student teams with the organization.
Okay.
They'll be work with us part-time to serve on these student teams with the organization. And when we launch in 2019, we're going to be focusing specifically on fund development, so fundraising initiatives for the organizations. Through our focus groups, that was the one area that all nonprofits that participated said that was their weakest point.
That makes sense.
So we're working on that. Actually, I have a meeting later today with someone that I'm looking at taking the lead on this, because I do realize I also can't do everything.
Right.
And this is someone that I've been working with and mentoring for the past several months, and this fits so much in alignment with what they're trying to do in the nonprofit community. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love when things
come together.
Line up like that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So where are you with kind of putting a show together and things like that? Just like that. I put you on the spot.
He put me on the spot because, you know why he put me on the spot? Because he actually has trained me. So, so we are going to launch, Jason,
It's
podcast.
It's public.
I have no choice now. We are launching a podcast for the social impact community.
Awesome. And I bring this up too, obviously to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know that was the primary point.
But also because it's such a great fit for so many areas. But the nonprofits you work with, the nonprofit community overall to get that message out so much and to just shine a spotlight on more and more folks. I think it's such a great tool for that.
And it's an easy way. Not everyone has the time to physically go to a training, but there's a lot that we can share. Mm-hmm. One thing that I say about the nonprofit community is we've done things and continue to do things in a very traditional way. We're the least innovative sector. We have innovative people, but we're not innovative. And hey, let's provide a training, and people need to come, show up, and sit down, and they get a PowerPoint presentation, and then we spend 15 minutes going around the room. But sometimes people just need the facts and the information. That's the only amount of time that they have, and if we can do that through something like a podcast, and the unfortunate part for our sector is podcasts do exist for social impact, and I'm using social impact because it's not just unique to nonprofits, but also for-profit, for good organizations. But people aren't consistent with it. They start, and then you'll see them go for 6 months, and then that's it. Yep. So if you go on, on Apple now and you search, you will see not too many podcasts that still exist that started years ago or that started in 2017. And then in 2018, they haven't posted anything. Right. And so I'm looking to do something that's consistent, that makes sense, that we can do around a series of topics that's not overwhelming for our resources so that we can make sure it continues and it happens on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's certainly not unique to the social impact sector at all. I mean, that's across all of iTunes and it's like that with people's blogs, and they do the same thing with podcasts. Yes. And it's that's just a great percentage are gonna do that. But it's so important to have that resource, because that's really when you start getting the momentum behind it. When you start getting into, you've been doing it for a year, and now you start pulling in resources, and you can build an audience to do even more good, both in teaching with a podcast like yours where you're like, hey, we're giving out lessons, or if it's one to bring on for interviews and actually have an audience to now it means something when a guest comes on, and it's huge. Such a great tool for that.
Yeah, I agree. And to one of your earlier questions, how do we get the word out? We do minimal advertising. It's been word of mouth and referrals for us, and I like it that way, because I feel if we were aggressive with marketing, we're also still small, and I want to make sure that we are prepared for growth. So I'm very careful about that. Like, we did our first outside of Startup Dallas, in terms of, I felt like that was a friendly environment where, not that I could control an interview, but I knew it would be an organic interview. Yeah. But I'm also very leery about media, because I don't get to control the output when it's something that's written about the organization. It's just an interview, and then someone goes away to write about it. So we did our very first written interview allowed that to happen earlier this year.
Really? For the first time?
For the first time. Because I don't do this for the attention. I think sometimes, I think this is important to touch on, especially when it comes to social impact work. It's not unique to social impact work, but a lot of people jump into this area, and it's not about the service, it's about them. Yeah. They need something, and it's driven by ego. And I don't really care about that stuff. I've had my career, and I'm on I'm midlife. I'm on the second half of life. And so I want to do the things that feel right, that fit into my life, and that make a difference. And that I feel like I have the permission when I don't want to do something. I don't feel a pressure to say I need to do it, because if I don't want to do it, I just don't do it, because sometimes it's not the right fit for the work and the people that I serve. And I have to keep that in mind. And that's something I don't think that everyone keeps that in mind when they're focusing on doing good. It's not you want to do good. It's of what you're trying to do. Is it needed? And are you able to quiet the noise enough and quiet your ego enough to say, you know what? This has been a great run, but this is no longer effective.
Sure.
And that's one of the frustrating points. People hear me talk about that a lot, that sometimes we have to make sure, when someone says, hey, did you see about that education program? And I go, well, is education, increasing the quality of education in that particular area the need? Or is that what you think you want to do because it's self-serving?
Is it a vanity metric?
Yeah. And so I think that's just something that we have to be more cognizant about. It's like when disasters happen and people automatically start these volunteer efforts to collect things. And they don't think about the people on the receiving end who have to sort through these things. Yeah. And so we sometimes have to just slow down and say, what's the best way that I can give back? And those are the conversations we need to have. They're a little harder to have because people aren't always willing and ready to listen to them. But if we're really trying to do good, we have to have those types of conversations. So we're using our time and talent and our resources in the right way.
And I think you're right on with that. It is a hard conversation to have. But you're acknowledging, too, that first and foremost, okay, yes to what you want to do. Your intention's great. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't want to squelch that at all. Mm-hmm. Right. But then doing those things in the right way. And that goes, and I know that's just because I know you, and I know we've had that conversation, that across the board, that's something that filters through everything that you do. From, like you mentioned earlier, you may not need to be a nonprofit, especially starting out. Like, people are like, I'm going to go start a nonprofit. Whoa. Okay.
No, just write a check.
Right. It might be that. It certainly, to start out, get the inner workings, see what this whole thing is about. And again, not to squelch the intent.
No. Or pilot it. Don't do the paperwork. Just pilot and test and tweak. And then if you have something that you think, even if someone's doing it, because people always say, well, someone else is doing that already, you don't need to do it. Well, they're serving the community that person is focused on. And oftentimes, we sometimes have to realize some nonprofits don't have the resources to expand beyond where they are. And there is a need for someone to duplicate services.
In a different community.
In a different community. Yeah. And, we always say collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And sometimes organizations are not ready to collaborate. They don't want to collaborate. And collaborations are costly. And so, and they take time. And so, it's not, like you say, it's not to minimize anyone's effort, but don't just do it on an impulse. Think about the longevity and the need and try piloting it a little bit to see if it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because because people, it's my passion. Passion dies, right? Yeah. And then the work continues. And you have to make sure that you're willing to continue the work and not just focus on filling that passionate desire that you might have.
Right. In a whim.
Yes.
Something. Right.
Yes.
And that also kind of transitions into what I think is so interesting is the other part of it too is like, okay, first of all, let's focus on what you want to achieve and how you're wanting to give back and the need that you're seeing out there that you want to fill. But then, does that actually need to be a nonprofit?
Exactly.
Should it be a nonprofit? Are you going to hurt the overall cause by not being for profit and not being, because there's so many ways you're limited by being a nonprofit officially after the paperwork.
After the paperwork, because people have to remember, you don't own a nonprofit, right? Mm-hmm. The community, the stakeholders own the nonprofit. And I try to tell people, when you want to do good, it's okay to be paid to do good.
Yes.
Make some money, because then you can replicate in a different way. You can, if you are earning profit that you get to determine how it's used, and you have control over it, and you don't have these IRS regulations to say how they can be used, and then you don't have donors donating money telling you how these things can be used, you can actually potentially do more good outside of the nonprofit structure. And I think people have to hear that it's okay to want to do good, and it's okay to make money doing it.
Right. But I think we're in a really unique time right now, because on one hand, there is still such a pervasive, those things are mutually exclusive in so many people's minds. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're really coming in to where people want to buy from businesses and support businesses that are behind a cause and that actually have a purpose to them.
Yes. And I think that's for some of us that want to do good, don't know how to get started, look for companies like that, because I think we all should kind of try to create our own philanthropic blueprint. If we have a desire, what does that look like? And it doesn't have to be all over the place. And then be okay with saying these are the only things that areas I want to serve in, whether it's I'm donating my time or I'm creating an organization. And I think it's something that takes a lot of thought. It's like I said, it's not an impulse. It shouldn't be an impulse-driven decisions. There should be some thought and effort put behind it.
And really, I think the other part too is it's easy to get overwhelmed with both sides, right? Like, everyone needs my help. Everyone needs something. Like, there's so many causes out there. Stuff. And what you touched on made me think of that in terms of, like, it's okay to focus on, I'm going to take care of this. However small this is right now, I'm going to take care of this and make a difference here. Because that has ripple effects. Like,
and that little
crazy
thing can have such tremendous impact. I think sometimes people miss that.
Yeah.
That if they just do one thing and do that one thing well, and they're consistent in doing it, and maybe it doesn't cost a lot of money to do, but the impact of the effort and the impact of the work is greater than these large ideas that you need all types of resources, finances, and all of these other things to do.
It may be so small in the beginning that you never see it. You never see those effects. That one person who saw you, that one kid who you kind of helped their neighborhood and they saw you doing that, wouldn't change the world. It's just
don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And that to me is where the joy comes in with the work. People always assume that my energy is on 10, and I always go, no, I'm very tired. If I didn't love what I was doing, Cause Studio and anything else in the community would be shut down.
Yeah.
So it has to come from a different place, because, there's some days I just say, why don't they just listen to me? If they just listen to me, then, we could just be done with this. But that's not life, and that's not how things work. But it is draining. It's draining work. Working to do good often doesn't feel good when you're doing it. The end results feel good, but the process in getting to that point,
it still works.
It's challenging and it's tiring. And sometimes it's thankless.
Yeah.
Sometimes doing good is sometimes a thankless job. And so you need to be realistic about what this looks like. And does it work for you? Does it work for you as well?
That's awesome. Yeah. I love what you're doing. I love the world you're operating in, and I've had the privilege of meeting, some of the nonprofits that you've worked with and introduced me to. It's just incredible. So how can people support you and follow along with you, stalk you on the internet, all that good stuff?
Yeah, stalk me on the internet is always good. I always say, so donating is always a great thing. If you go to Cause Studio, it's always a great thing to donate, or donate to some of the causes that we support. That's equally as good for us. I'm not selfish in my request.
Nice.
Donate your time. We're always looking for experience. Now, that's probably the one area that I'm very picky about, is that when we request and vet volunteers, experts in the community to come in and help, I really need for you to be an expert.
Awesome.
I don't want to reduce the quality of the services and the training that we provide to the people that we serve simply because someone says I can do it. I need you to be able to do it because you truly are the expert. I want the best of the best. I think that's what our sector deserves.
And who specifically are you what verticals are you kind of looking for in that area?
So I'm always looking for people in the fundraising space and the fund development space.
Yep.
Capacity building, so people that can help build infrastructure and operations. Program, I think we're pretty good. I think that's where most volunteers want to serve in helping to build program. But we're trying to build organizations that can provide good programming. And that's where I find the weakest links are within the startup nonprofit community. People go straight to program, but they forget about the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So those are probably the main ways in which people can help us. Coming to our events, just sharing information when they see our events. They can sign up on our website, coststudio.co. For our newsletter. We don't send a whole lot out. I'm not a spammer. But signing up for our newsletters and just sharing information on the events that we have, following us on social media. We're Cost Studio on every popular social media outlet. And just letting people know that there is a resource out in the community that can really help them. I think that's a great opportunity for us. And if you want to join our team from a volunteer perspective, we are a volunteer-driven organization. So this is not a revenue generator for me personally. And so I'm looking for other people that want to join in different capacities, whether it's helping on the operations side, helping on the fundraising side, or helping even curate and strengthen our programming too. Fantastic. So I want this to be this is a community effort. I've always said this is not for me to have. This is for me to create for as long as I believe that North Texas needs it.
Wonderful. Love what you do.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks so much for being on.
I am glad to be here. I'm glad that we finally got to do this with my hectic schedule and yours too.
I don't know about you, but I have not a clue where we are right now either.
Well, I do know. I know how to get back.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I guess this is what being mobile is all about. You just ride around and talk until you get lost.
Exactly.
But luckily I do know. Luckily I do know how to get us back.
Perfect. Find her. Connect with her. Help her. Help Cost Studio.
I appreciate you all. Thanks.
See you. If you're in the Dallas area, let's connect in person. I'm at the Coffee House Cafe on Preston and Frankfurt every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., hosting an awesome meetup where we talk business, startups, and tech. It's an amazing room of people to network with, and most weeks what we do is we dig in and mastermind for the folks in the room and connect everyone to the resources they need to grow. I'll see you there. Thanks so much for checking out this interview, and I hope you enjoyed meeting Kimberly if you didn't know her beforehand, and certainly digging in and learning more about her story in case you did. Jump over to coststudio.co and support her, support that mission. It's fantastic, and I think there's so many areas that she can help folks, whether you're needing that help with your nonprofit or you know someone who does. Send them her way, and they'll certainly be taken care of. As you heard in this interview, she knows what she's talking about. I can't wait to see how much more good she does in this world. And if you like interviews like this, which of course you do, right? Who doesn't? If you like more interviews like this, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching. If you're listening on iTunes or in your favorite podcast platform, make sure you subscribe there. Leave us a review on iTunes, if you will. It helps us get found everywhere. And we'll see you next time.
It's Saturday night. It was Saturday night and I'm feeling kinda silly. Winter coat on cause the air was chilly, but I'ma make my way out to the record spot. Gotta find some new breaks for the beats to rock. I gotta come with the flavor like some lifesavers. ONeil and latest Dr. Beatmaker. If I'm a player, it's like your tape deck. And if you miss the gig, then take a rain check. Stacks of wax piled high to the ceiling, need a U-Haul truck if I would think of